Chapter 25. I woke Saturday morning stiff and sore. As much as I'd enjoyed the ride and the time with Devon, all day on the back of a motorcycle hadn't been kind to me. I eased my way into a hot shower, hoping it would help. At the same time, I was glad Devon wasn't there to see me. He would have hovered and tried to take care of me. I wasn't in the mood for it. Later, feeling a bit better, I had dressed and pulled my hair up before heading for the kitchen and something to eat. Since Devon had been gone when I woke, I knew he was at work. We had a week left until the wedding, and he had next weekend off. Devon's agreement with Dad was that they each took alternating weekends off. Sometimes Devon arranged for someone else to work for him, like when we had to go out of town, but most of the time he did it himself. What was the point in having a job if had someone else work it for you? Between his disability from the military and his wage as Theron, he didn't need to keep working for Dad, but he liked it and he wanted to stay. I was glad he had something he liked to do, and that Dad had reliable help. In the kitchen, I found Gavin sitting at the table, sipping coffee from a mug. "Morning." I shuffled past him on my way to the refrigerator. "Morning," he said. "How are you today?" "I'm up." I pulled the eggs and everything I needed out of the fridge. He stayed quiet while I scrambled me some eggs and ate them. He spoke only after I put my plate in the sink. "What's the plan for today?" "I have to go to Mom's, more wedding stuff." "I don't know what." I sat back down at the table, not wanting to have to get up and move. I stared off into space, drinking from my glass of tea for several minutes before pushing myself up and heading for the bedroom. Maybe some Tylenol would help. I wanted something stronger, but Alexis had told me Tylenol only while pregnant. I came back to the kitchen a few minutes later, sandals on and ready to go. "So what's the plan? Are you going with me or what? Who all is supposed to be there?" "Mom, maybe Amber. Brittany is busy today." "Then I'll come with you. Your mom knows about us and Mrs. Wilson is one of us." "Then let's go." I grabbed my PCD and purse and we headed out. We had been sitting around my mother's dining room table for almost an hour when my mother turned to Gavin. "Are you sure there's nothing I can get you? Something to eat, maybe?" "No, ma'am, I'm fine," he said. He had been sitting at the table with us, sipping coffee as he listened to me argue with Amber about what I didn't for my wedding. She wanted to invite half the town. I kept reminding her that they wouldn't fit, not for the ceremony or the reception, and that I had booked the locations I wanted, just as Devon had told me to. Mom was a little flustered that Gavin was content to sit and listen to us without anyone waiting on him. She had a tendency to hover over guests and see that they had anything they might want. "Mom, he's fine." I tried to distract her. "Nicki." She was aghast. She thought I was being rude. "Mom, he spent nearly every moment with me that Devon hasn't for the last month. I don't consider him company anymore. He's a friend. I'll let you in on a secret if you like." I was teasing, it wasn't really a secret, but she didn't know it. "What?" She looked confused. "Sometimes I let him cook for me." "Nicki." "What?" I gave her a wide-eyed look. "It's not like I treat him like a servant. I didn't say I make him cook for me." I rolled my eyes. Gavin couldn't help it any longer, he laughed. "Really, Mrs. Daniels, it's okay. I do cook for her sometimes. I enjoy cooking and sitting doing nothing gets old." I offered. "See?" I felt justified. Still, Mom wasn't happy. Amber had stayed surprisingly quiet through our argument, but she spoke up now. "If you have someone with you all the time, what are you going to do for the wedding?" "I'll have someone with me then too." I shrugged, not really seeing a problem. While I get ready during the day, then all the enforcers or everyone on the Anikitos team will be at the ceremony. How will you explain them to your family? She appeared satisfied with herself, as if she had finally found a way to get what she wanted. If it's supposed to be a small ceremony, just friends and family, how will you explain that many unfamiliar faces? It's not that many, I reasoned. The Anikitos team is only a few men. Gavin here, Terry, Gabriel, Caden, plus a couple more that Devon has approved. I listed them, expecting her to know the names, even if she didn't know their exact positions. My family has no clue who Devon's friends are. All I have to do is tell them that anyone they don't know is one of his friends. It's not that complicated. Amber was put out that she couldn't use the enforcers as an excuse to make the wedding bigger than I wanted, but she only pouted for a moment before turning her attention to another aspect. How to decorate the island. I turned to Gavin and gave him a smirk as I rolled my eyes. Mom caught it, but she only smiled. Monday, I was eager to start my new job. Last week, with nothing keeping my soon-to-be mother-in-law from hounding me about wedding details, was enough to drive me crazy. I'd talked to Bill and explained to him that if I sleep past a certain time, I could sleep through the worst of my morning sickness, and he agreed to let me start later in the day. The idea was that I would work part-time in the office, still going in every day, but different hours. It wasn't as if I needed to be there for the store to open, and I could do research and search for possible acquisitions on the web at home. Gavin was already at the house when I got up, and he went to work with me. As far as I knew, the plan was for him to sit outside my office, which was in the rear of the store. Bill was at the shop when I arrived. He introduced me to the store manager, Kathy Lowry. Kathy was a couple of inches shorter than my 5 feet 8 inches, but it wasn't her size that made me feel out of place. It was the aura of professionalism that surrounded her. She had short brown hair that barely reached her jaw. It had been carefully cut and styled until it looked perfect. She wore a suit and looked as if she hadn't ever considered wearing anything casual to the little shop. It was the female equivalent of a suit and tie. Looking at her, it made me feel a little uncomfortable in my knee-length dress. Not that I thought I looked bad, but it was more a church or day dress than a professional outfit. I had suits. I'd worn them every day when I'd worked at the college, but I'd been under the impression that things were laid back here. Bill must have sensed my discomfort. Don't worry, you're fine. Kathy has this concept that as the store manager, she needs to look more professional. Personally, I like a more casual look, especially for anyone who will be dealing with customers on a regular basis. It makes them feel more at home, like you're more reachable. You'll probably spend most of your time in the back, so it's less important, but I'd prefer that when you're in the shop you dress in something customers can interact and relate to. You never know when someone is going to want to know more about an item they're looking at from, or have some special request that they'll want you to find for them. I nodded, making mental note. After making introductions, Bill took his leave, saying he had a meeting. Kathy showed me to the office that she said would be mine. It wasn't huge but not tiny either. It was a little cluttered and had obviously been used as a storage space for a while. Feel free to clean the place up, organize and decorate as you see fit. Make the space yours. Here's your system. She handed me a tablet. Most of the software we use is pretty standard, but please ask if you have any questions. She led me back out into the storage area at the rear of the store. This is my office. She motioned to another door. I'm generally here between 8 and 5 with a lunch break, but lunch is rarely on schedule for me. She showed me around the storage space and then around the display floor, pointing out the types of things that tended to sell well as those that didn't, before letting me go back to my office to get acquainted with things. I decided to clean up some first, and I enlisted Gavin's help to move the heavier pieces of furniture, knowing he wouldn't let me move them by myself anyway. By noon, we had all the extra stuff out of the small office, and I was able to arrange things the way I wanted. It was just after 1 o'clock, and I was watching Gavin move the last piece of furniture when Devon appeared in the open doorway. What's going on here? He looked around the small room. Cleaning things up, making the office a little more habitable. Don't worry, I didn't move anything myself. I held my hands up in front of me. He glanced again, a little small but not bad. It will be better once I get some things on the walls. Any trouble? Devon looked to Gavin. Gavin shook his head. Devon turned back to me. You ready? Ready? I asked, my appointment's not for another hour and a half. But you need to eat too. I figured we'd have lunch then go to your appointment. How do you know I haven't already eaten? I hadn't, but I didn't like him assuming I hadn't. Even if you have, you'll be hungry again soon. I sighed and pulled my purse out of a desk drawer. All right, let me just stop and let Kathy know what's up. We ate at a local Mexican restaurant before going to the doctor's office. I checked in and got the clipboard with the paperwork I needed to fill out before sitting down beside Devon in one of the uncomfortable padded chairs in the waiting area. You would think we'd progressed far enough that we could do away with some of this paperwork. I paused at the first question. Name? This shouldn't be this hard. I knew my name, but it would be changing soon. Should I put my name or yours? I looked at Devon. He looked confused for a second. Are you taking my name? It's up to you. I'd plan to. Then use Wilson, it will be yours before the week's out anyway. I nodded and continued to fill out the paperwork, personal information, and medical history. I was stumped again when I got past personal history, and it asked about family medical history. I could answer about my adopted family, but that wouldn't mean anything. I flipped through, making sure there wasn't anything I could answer, until I got to the questions about the baby's father's family. I asked Devon each question, marking down the answers he knew as he gave them to me. After answering everything we could, I turned the paperwork back in to the receptionist and went back to my seat. We didn't wait long before a nurse called my name, and we followed her into the back where she weighed me and escorted us into an exam room. I noticed you didn't fill out the family history for yourself. She looked at me. I was adopted. I don't know who my birth parents were. I have no idea what to put down. All right. She made a notation on the digital chart on the device she carried. She took my blood pressure and asked a few more questions before telling us the doctor would be with us shortly and leaving us alone in the room. We sat in a semi-awkward silence while we waited for the doctor. Neither of us knew what would happen next, and we both felt a little nervous about it. I was perched on the edge of the exam table, while Devon sat in one of the two padded chairs that matched the ones in the waiting room. Several minutes later, a knock sounded on the door before it opened, and a bright-faced woman in her mid-30s entered the room, a broad smile on her face. Dominique Wilson? She asked, making sure she had the right room. Call me Nicki, please, I said. She nodded and closed the door. I'm Dr. Keenan. She held out one hand toward me. As I shook it, I noticed she had smooth, pale skin. She wore a lot of sunscreen to keep it that way, or the lighter streaks in her dark hair were from a bottle, not the sun. You're here for an initial prenatal visit? Yes, ma'am. She checked the file in her hand. It looks like you're just over 10 weeks along, she glanced at me for confirmation, and you had a vaginal exam within the last 6 months? Yes. I answered both questions. Dr. Keenan asked a bunch of questions before she had me lay back on the table so she could feel my belly. With careful hands, she pressed several spots on my lower abdomen before moving back to the counter to make notes in my chart. I started to sit up. Not yet, I've got one more thing. She pulled something that looked like the tablet Kathy had given me that morning, only slightly smaller. She stood on the opposite side of the table from where Devon sat, my hand in his. Lift your shirt a little. I slid my shirt up, revealing the tiny pouch of my lower tummy. She laid the small electronic on my exposed belly and tapped on the screen several times. The framed poster hanging on the wall in front of me changed. A blob a little larger than my palm appeared on what I now realized was a screen. She shifted the device on my tummy, sliding the waistband of my skirt down as she moved the thing until the image of a tiny baby with an oversized head appeared on the screen. Smiling, she looked up at us. "Do you know what that is?" I stared at the screen, unblinking. "Is that?" I couldn't make myself finish the question. Her smile grew into a grin. "That is your baby." She touched the screen again and there was a soft whir sound. "And that is your baby's heartbeat." "That's really fast for a heartbeat," Devon said. "For an adult or even a child, yes it is, but a baby's heart rate is much faster." She was quiet for a few seconds. "This one is about 150 beats a minute. That's in the mid-range for a fetus at this stage." Speechless, I could only stare and listen, blown away by the wave of emotion that washed over me. I could see my baby and hear its heartbeat. Somehow that made it all the more real, less a concept to me. I admit, the morning sickness had kinda done that too, but not to this extent. Dr. Keenan turned off the sound of the heartbeat and put the tablet-like device away before going back to the chart to make more notes. "You're going to need some blood work done. You can have that drawn here or at the lab, and I'll see you again in a month. Do you have any questions?" She looked back and forth between the two of us, and when we both said no, she looked at us once more. "The nurse will be right back with the blood orders." She left the room. Devon helped me sit up, moving to stand at the end of the table between my knees. I looked up at him and saw the damp lines where tears had run down his face. I ran my thumbs across them, wiping away the evidence. "Our baby," I whispered and then pressed my face against his neck, my arms going around his waist. We stayed there, just holding each other for a moment.